Hi, everyone. Thanks for jumping on to clicktohouston.com. It's meteorologist Justin Stapleton. I'm here alongside Chief Meteorologist Frank Billingsley. Yeah, we're split screening right now. There we are. As you saw a second ago, we've got Harris County Flood Control Meteorologist Jeff Lindner with us, someone who we'll probably be hearing a lot from over the next couple of days, Frank, as things are starting to get very interesting in the tropics and the Caribbean, and potentially what is going to be, could be quite a sizable storm coming into the Gulf here this weekend.
That's one of my first questions for Jeff. Why has this not been upgraded from 99L to at least a tropical depression or at least a potential tropical cyclone number 9? Jeff, do you have an answer for that at all?
Yeah, technically there's no center, and as y'all know, you got to have an actual center for it to be classified as a tropical depression. I'm certainly sure the Hurricane Center is definitely looking at the potential there for those potential tropical cyclone advisories, at least for the Yucatan, because that's coming up pretty quick here. But the point being is up here on the Gulf Coast, we definitely need to be paying attention to this.
So do you have any idea when they may fly this?
I believe the recon, the U.S. Air Force reconnaissance mission is planned for tomorrow, around noon, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, that'll help. That'll get some real-time information.
80%, 40% 2 days.
Right.
So.
Well, and this popped this morning as well, Jeff. This was something you and I were discussing here. This is the type of storm that, as it's moving into a more favorable environment, the wind shear is starting to decrease. Obviously, we know the sea surface temperatures, as you talked about last night, are basically gas on a fire in front of all over.
They're relatively cool in this area just because of Grace. Churn things up. But they're still 85 degrees.
Right.
So all you need is 80. So yeah, they're plenty warm.
Yeah.
It's up around Louisiana and Texas. You get to 88 and 89 degrees.
Yeah, I'll
so
show you
it's
that
even
here in a second.
Hotter than that.
So a question, I guess, is what we're talking about this is Jeff, just in looking at what you're looking at now, what you guys at Flood Control are looking at, what Frank and the rest of our team here have been looking at, what do you think people can expect over the next 48 to 72 hours? That would put us in the Friday, Saturday time frame. And obviously this is something in terms of any landfall, whatever it becomes at this point, is a little later than that. What over the next 72 hours are we going to look at as this storm enters the Gulf here?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for all of us to be looking at is where the center of circulation actually forms. And that's going to be the biggest challenge over the next couple of days is where exactly that center forms. Is a little bit further south, is a little bit further north. And that's going to really determine probably the track in the Gulf of Mexico, along with the high pressure over the southeast United States and how strong or how weak that high pressure is. Those are going to be the two controlling factors here going forward of how this tracks and moves across the Gulf of Mexico. But I think the threat is certainly in the northwestern Gulf, be it Texas or Louisiana or possibly even as far east as Mississippi. But there's just a lot of uncertainty right now with all of the with the models and everything, because we just don't have a defined center in this tropical wave.
Although interestingly, the European and the American have come more in line. Certainly yesterday, they were Mexico and Corpus for the European, and then it became more Rockport for the American, Louisiana for the European, and now today they're both in that sort of Sabine Pass to Vermilion Bay geography. Which is interesting to me because of what you just said. There's no defined circulation. There's no center, but yet the two major global models are coming together in lining up a track. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's we're showing what we call the deterministic model runs, and so that's what you're showing behind you right there on the screen, and that's the operational, the single model run of that model. But the other thing that we specifically look at is what we call the ensembles, and that is each one of these models has many members that are run with just slightly different conditions, just slightly different locations of where the center may form and stuff like that. And a lot of those ensemble runs are still further to the west towards Texas, and so that continues the uncertainty part of this. Is it going to go as far east as these deterministic runs show, or is the potential for those runs to shift a little bit to the west and be closer to what we call their ensembles? And that's where the uncertainty is coming in. And it's just, at this point, it's just so difficult to know which way that's going to trend. It could trend west, it could trend east, it could stay right there. And that's why we keep asking everybody, please tune in at least once or twice a day, because we're constantly seeing these kind of shifts And every 6-12 hours, we know a little bit more.
Yeah, and as we said, we've got the morning run of the European should be coming in any minute now at this point, and that should give us an update on whether or not this is going to remain, where it is now, or they are going to shift that track as well.
From what I've seen of it, it hasn't changed much.
I agree, and I don't think it will either. But the other thing I was talking about this morning, and Jeff, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. We kind of talked about this briefly before we came on the live chat here is that, and you and I are discussing this, Frank, is that, the difference between the intensity, if you look at the white circles here, if you're looking at this, those are the isobars, or the lines of pressure in the atmosphere. The tighter they're packed in, the stronger the winds. That is a whole different look than that right there.
Yeah, right now it's Jeff, a 75 mile an hour minimal Category 1 hurricane according to the Euro versus 140 mile an hour Category 4 hurricane according to the American model. The huge intensity disparity. It's very warm water. I'm surprised the Euro, it's like ticking up a little bit, but I'm surprised the Euro's not coming in a little stronger. What do you make of that?
Yeah, we've seen that. If you remember with some of the other storms we've had this year, even if you look at Henri in the off the U.S. East Coast the other week, some of these intensity forecasts have been really off with some of the models, and so I'd really caution everybody right now looking at the intensities of the actual forecast models and really just understand that conditions are generally looking favorable for intensification. You see the water temperatures right there behind you. Like y'all mentioned, it's going to be relatively favorable in the Gulf of Mexico. And so, are we talking a strong tropical storm, Category 1 or something higher? At this point, I think we all need to be looking definitely at some sort of a hurricane. Now, how strong, that will kind of flush itself out over the next couple of days. But you saw what Grace did last week. You saw what Laura did last year in Harvey. It doesn't take long in the Gulf of Mexico when things are favorable for these things to get going.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention is that we saw with Grace that it came in as a, decent looking Category 1 hurricane, and within less than 24 hours, they had a Cat 3 that was coming right on land.
Yep. Well, Hannah last year was a strong Category 1, then almost a Category 2. And then, of course, Laura really pumped up. But all these, Michael, you can go back over time and see so many that really in the Gulf of Mexico, it's almost like you don't quite know where the loop current is going to put the warmest water. But clearly, it's Texas and Louisiana right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's the concern.
Yeah, that is the concern. All right, so let's do a little. Meteorologists generally don't like to play devil's advocate and sort of go worst case scenario on this, Jeff, but considering that there is still a lot of uncertainty with this, one of the things that flood control, the improvements that you were trying to make since Harvey was to decrease the amount of flood potential for more inconvenient weather, similar to what we saw last Monday when we had the two areas of storms collide right over top. There's been some improvements that have been made in terms of infrastructure-wise. How is everything, in your opinion, in your flood control opinion, how have things performed since Harvey over the last couple of years, including this summer, as things have been changed, things have been improved in going forward?
Yeah, I'll give you some numbers. Actually, we put together a thing. Today's the anniversary of Harvey, and we put together some numbers of what we've done, and over the past 3 years with the start of all of the 181 bond projects and the completion, I think, of about 27 or so. We've removed about 11,000 homes from the floodplain in Harris County. So that's a fairly significant number of homes that we've been able to remove from the floodplain, and we have another 600 or so that have been purchased and bought out through our home acquisition program, and about another 650 or so that are in the process of being purchased. And so all of these measures combined is helping reduce the flood risk across our area. And there's still a lot to be done. There's a lot of projects in place and ongoing right now. And so each one of these projects that gets completed or even just gets started helps with reducing the flood threat. And one other thing to mention, you're talking about the rainfall we had last week over the Galleria area, Westheimer, and we had the street flooding. A reminder that our streets are designed to flood here, to hold water when we get these really intense rainfalls, and because our underground system isn't quite capable of keeping up with some of these rainfall rates. So anytime we start getting 2 or 3 inches an hour or greater than that, we're going to have street flooding. And for the most part, once the rain stops in an hour or so, that water will go down. But the street systems are designed that way to help keep the water out of the homes. They're purposely designed to hold that excess water when we get that early heavy rain.
Yeah, and that's something that, what we want to, for folks that are watching here, want to remind you that if you download Frank's free forecast app and the hurricane app on your phone, not only do you get the notifications with the moderate heavy rainfall, which I've already gotten one today on here, but the lightning detection as well to say, hey, it's real close to you. But now you get an opportunity that'll let you know if there is flooding that is around your area as well. And Jeff, I've got to believe that that's something that is crucially important for people that may be not looking at the radar or don't have it popped up, but that notification pops up on your phone to say, hey, you may be in real trouble quickly there as well. And that's part of the free forecast app and something that I think would be really beneficial, given a situation where there's so much distractions for folks so that they don't get themselves in trouble and get enough lead time to get out.
Yeah, absolutely. The knowledge is kind of power, especially when we get into situations with heavy rainfall. It can happen quickly, and having that information delivered directly to your cell phone is the quickest, probably the simplest way to get the information you need. And so by weather apps and signing up for stuff and building it to where it's for you, that's certainly the way to get that information so you can make the decision you need to be able to make.
Yeah, great advice as well. All right, so let's do a little forecasting as we get in towards the weekend and into early next week. I'm going to pop up the American model here, Frank, and we'll just kind of have you and Jeff. I think this will be really helpful to the folks here, just sort of talk your way through this. You guys just sort of see what you see and let them know. This has been the prevailing player for our weather pattern for about 4 or 5 days, this big ridge of high pressure. Yep. Obviously, this has got to move out of the way or nothing happens at this point, right, in terms of where this is going to go.
Right. This was why it was originally down in Mexico.
Right, similar to what Grace
Brownsville.
Mm-hmm.
But now the high is going to move out of here,
right,
and another high is going to come dropping in from the Carolinas and into Florida. And you see that's what you have right there coming in through the Carolinas, the American model. The European model is down a little more in central Florida.
Sure.
But regardless, this is going to follow the path of least resistance.
Right
now, that would be between the two highs. There's also a low moving across Canada, and that will help tug it north, very much like what happened with Rita back in 2005. So that's why we're getting a very similar track. But as Jeff said, until we know exactly where it is, if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going.
Right.
And we just don't know where we are quite yet.
Yeah.
But the model's still doing a remarkable job of coming up with something.
Mm-hmm. So, Jeff, the question is, if this is the scenario we're looking at, and obviously we're just kind of, prognosticating at this point, but if we are getting something that looks similar to this as we get in towards, let's say, the Sunday, Monday time frame, what precautions will you and the rest of Harris County Flood Control and the county for that matter, be taking in advance of this, let's say by Saturday or Sunday, if we're looking at a potential for, even if it's not a direct hit, that it's close enough that we may be dealing with some of the effects of this?
Yeah, right now we're probably looking at something similar to what we did with Laura last year. Kind of a similar setup here, just passing potentially just to our east. And so we're going to be paying close attention. We're starting conference calls tomorrow. And then there will be, obviously, as the threat becomes more realized and more certain, there will be a number of conference calls as we go into Friday and then continuing into the weekend. And that's something to really make sure everybody understands. Is we're going into the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and if we do have a stand, that those will be preparation days. So you can't just take off the weekend and tune it out. You need to be paying attention Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to what is going to be happening and what the forecast is, because by early next week, this will be somewhere in the northwestern Gulf, be it off our coast or over toward the Louisiana coast, and so you cannot tune it out this weekend.
That's certainly something that we're going to keep a track here as well. Speaking of track, I know this is something, I showed this yesterday, and this you mentioned this, Jeff, that the ensemble spaghetti models that we always talk about, the spaghetti plots that roll through, without having initial information, a la our center or core, I want to show you this here, because we always talk about where's the cluster, right? Where are they going with this storm? Well, this is part of the problem that a lot of the models and the forecasters in particular are having, is that, Frank, if we kind of roll that out, look, we've got a spread from Tampico to Mobile Bay at this point.
Yeah, a lot of these are those ensemble models that Jeff talked about, where you run a model and you move it a little bit, run another model, move it a little bit. So there's a lot of that going on. I see the Canadian in here. Mm-hmm. It's just too early to know. I mean, the models are going to do only what they can do with the information they have we get a plane in there, until we know where the center is and we
Yep.
really know what direction it's moving and how fast, it's hard to make much more sense of these.
Yeah, it is. And if you're here at clicktohouston.com and you're trying to wonder, well, how am I going to be able to track that? You go to our Hurricane Central. That's a great sort of one-stop shop, because as soon as they slap on what we were talking about, a potential tropical cyclone number 10 at this point, or even a tropical depression designation to that activates a lot that's on this page here, and you can track that real time. You can get updates from that. It's just a really good tool. Something that we need for sure.
Is it 10? Do we have 9?
I think it's 10. Is that right, Jeff? Am I saying that correct? It's 10? Or are we at 9?
Well, Ida would be 9, but I don't know if they've put something on the Atlantic.
I don't think they have yet, so it would be 9. You're right.
Be 9 or 10.
Yeah, that would be 9. So,
well, I think you can also get these spaghetti models on our app, but I think I wouldn't pay too much attention to them just yet. I mean,
Right.
they go clear from Pascagoula all the way down to Tampico. So for now, it's anybody's ball game. So Jeff, as far as flooding is concerned, is there a threshold that we have yet? So that I know we always say 2 inches per hour, and you're going to see street flooding. How much rain per hour in a neighborhood causes? I mean, I guess it depends on the neighborhood, causes water to go into homes. Do we have that kind of a number yet?
Yeah, it just really depends on the ability of the drainage systems, and honestly, probably the year the subdivision was kind of built. Some of our older subdivisions that were built back in the 60s and 70s and 50s, they don't have the same type of designs that we have nowadays that allow water to kind of escape out of them in extreme events. And so typically you see a lot of your flooding in these older areas because we build differently now. If you know, in the 1990s and 2000s, 2010s, we build subdivisions completely different than what we used to. And so we purposely build in for that type of situation where you get these really intense rainfalls. And so, it changes. In the older areas, you might be looking at 1.5 to 2 inches at the max. And in some of the newer areas, they can probably handle a little bit closer to 2.5 inches or so before you start getting the water in the streets. But it just varies on when home flooding starts.
Mm-hmm. We just had a question come in on our live chat here. They had asked, and it's a question I think everybody wants to know is, how soon will we know what direction it will go? That's a $68,000 question at this point.
Well, it's going west now. So
yeah,
I know that.
Right. We know where it's going now. It's just a question of once it gets over. Here's a question I have for you, Jeff, and I'd be curious, Frank, what your thoughts are on this too. We've been noticing, especially with the European model, and I feel like I'm curious to see if the American model will follow suit. Instead of plowing right across the Yucatan Peninsula, which clearly slowed Grace down at that point and was able to kind of reform. If this takes more of that northerly track and maybe just clips the tip of Cancun or misses it completely, what is that going to change the dynamic to?
Oh, well, that's a Camille or a Michael, isn't it, Jeff? I mean, that's, if you miss landmass,
right,
and you have all that warm water, you could go easily to a Cat 4 or 5, I would think.
Yeah, I just think, what's interesting is if you look at some of the global models, they don't really show a lot of development in the Western Caribbean, maybe a very weak surface low. It's not until it really gets in the Gulf of Mexico and within about 48 or 60 hours of the coast that we really start to see it really start to develop. And so I think through Saturday, we're going to be playing this kind of guessing game on where the center is, where it's forming, how the structure is. Is it kind of weighted to one side that can kind of tug the center in a certain direction? And you factor all that in along with the potential land interaction with the Yucatan, and this makes things really, really uncertain. Helps some of these weaker broad systems get a little bit better organized. The friction kind of tightens them up a little bit, but that's one thing I have noticed, just kind of looking at the models, is there's just not a lot in the Western Caribbean. It's really once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico that we really start to see the structure really become well defined, and then it kind of gets really going as it comes up toward the coast. And so I'm really not sure there's going to be a whole lot of answers when it comes to where the center is and all that until we get to probably the Friday or Saturday timeframe. So those are some, it's tough. It's tough for us to sit here, and it's tough to try to make decisions and all that when you have all these models pointing up in our general direction, and we just don't know at this point.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And let me ask you this, Jeff, and I'm not going to hold you to it, but we do have an 80% chance over the next 5 days. But that means we have a 20% chance that we would not get any development. Do you see that as a real possibility, even if it's just 20%, that this thing will just? I don't see wind shear I don't see particularly dry air. I don't see what would not make it go all the way to at least a tropical depression. But there seems to be a 20% chance that it may not.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you look at the model support of development, I definitely think the support is there for something to develop. Maybe some interaction with the Yucatan, but like I said, once this gets into the Gulf of Mexico, I think it's pretty certain that there is going to be some storm of some degree into the Gulf as we get into late this weekend, and then coming up to the coast early next week. And I can't emphasize this enough. The weekend potentially is preparation time. You can't go out of town and turn your back on this over the weekend because potentially we're looking at a landfall as early as Monday night or Tuesday morning somewhere in the Northwest Gulf.
Thank you so much for your insight. I completely agree.
Yeah, I think you're right. Jeff, thank you. We appreciate you. My guess is this is not the last time we will talk to you this week or into the weekend. So thank you for your time today. And again, for those of you that are watching us on the live stream here, real easy to get a hold of Jeff Lindner. He's on Twitter. That's a great way to kind of get his updates
and
as
his
well.
Facebook. Follow him on Facebook.
His Facebook updates are great. Harris County Flood Control is a really good website as well. I'll put that up on Click to Houston to hear as you get an idea that you need that. Of course, don't forget about Frank's free forecast app, the Hurricane app. You get the push notifications for not only lightning, but rainfall, and now for the flood tracker as well. So if you've got flooding close to your area, that's a new push notification. That'll come
And the spaghetti models once they get better.
Yep, spaghetti models will be there at the Hurricane page. Click to Houston.com/flood tracker if you're on your desktop. Real good resources as well. So we will get you the latest. Frank's got all kinds of stuff coming up here at 4 o'clock, 5, 6, and of course 10. And then I'll have the latest on the overnight runs early tomorrow morning as well. So best advice, Frank, is just what?
Keep informed.
Keep informed.
Yeah.
Stay with us
up
for
to
the next
date.
couple
We'll be
days.
here.
Yeah, we will.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you later.